UFC Fight Night, Hernandez versus Pereira. Obviously, the biggest MMA event in the world is not coming from the UFC this weekend. All eyes are going to be on the PFL, where Francis Ngannou is taking on Renan Ferreira. It does feel like the UFC kind of conceded defeat and said, hey, PFL, you have your moment. We're still going to do our thing and put together, a pretty mediocre card for the fans. But you guys can have your weekend. We'll get you pretty much any other week of the year. For what it's worth, I do have Francis Ngannou beating Pereira by KO. I think he's got the slicker boxing. Ferreira's a big, scary dude. Obviously, anything can happen. But I do give Ngannou the edge in power and I think in precision as well. Should be a fun one. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this UFC card where the UFC is displaying two of their own heavyweights to open up this card. It is Austen Lane taking on Robelis Despaigne. Despaigne did suffer his first career loss to Waldo Cortez Acosta in his last fight that I believe we did pick Cortez Acosta in. Wasn't really shocked by that result. Robelis just does not really look the part of a fighter. He's got a lot of holes in this game. If you get him down, he's not going to be able to get back up. Obviously, he's a big, powerful dude, very destructive, striking. But I just don't really see it from him. I don't see him as having a whole lot of potential. He's really old, kind of got a late start to the game. He's taking on Austen Lane here, who's got quite a bit more experience. Another guy who started his mixed martial arts journey a bit later in his life, former football player. I do think there's a path for victory for Austen Lane here. He's going to be probably the more skilled guy, but he's a guy who's gotten caught a few times. I do think Robelis is going to KO him. If Austen Lane tries to exchange with him on the feet, which I do see happening. So we're taking Robelis by KO, but it's not really going to change the fact that I'm not too high on him in the future. Next fight is Melissa Martinez taking on Alice Ardelean. This is Melissa Martinez's first fight in a couple of years. I think she last fought in September of 2022, where she suffered her sole career loss in her UFC debut versus Elise Reed, who fights later on this card, maybe even right after this fight. Ardelean's been more active. She fought not too long ago, won her UFC debut versus Shauna Bannon. She is honestly arguably one of the UFC's most popular fighters. I think if you just took into account like social media metrics, like this, she is a social media star. So I do feel like they're going to want to prop her up. It's a pretty close fight. Martinez has been a bit more inactive. Ardelean, kind of what have you done for me lately? She actually has won recently. I thought she looked pretty good in that Shauna Bannon fight. We're taking Ardelean by decision. Next is Jessica Penne taking on Elise Reed. Elise has been finished a few times in her UFC career. She's also got a couple of strong wins versus fighters like Jinh Fry and Melissa Martinez, who we just discussed. She's taking on Penne, who has really good grappling. She's a bit older. I think she's like in her 40s now. But, has a lot of in-cage experience. Both these fighters are aggressive. I think this actually should be a pretty fun one. Both like to move forward, so it should be interesting how who really, really tries to set the pace in this one. Reed's going to want to keep it on the feet, but I think Penne's grappling is actually going to be the biggest advantage for either fighter. I think Penne can win this one by submission. We've seen Elise Reed get submitted before. Penne's got some strong grappling. That's the pick. Next up is a women's bantamweight fight, I believe, between Joselyne Edwards and Tamires Vidal. Both these fighters are coming off of back-to-back losses. Or this might actually be... I think it's a bantamweight fight. Edwards is a decent-sized favorite. She's bigger. I think she has better grappling than Tamires Vidal, who's hasn't really shown a whole lot in her UFC career. Edwards, like I said, is the favorite. I think she'll be able to just out-grapple Vidal and win a decision. Next fight is a bantamweight matchup between Brad Katona and Gene Matsumoto. Matsumoto had a great Dana White Contender Series win. And then he did win his UFC debut as well versus Dan Argueta. Pretty close fight. I mean, Argueta was able to take him down a few times, but the longer the fight went on, the more Matsumoto kind of separated himself. To me, Katona feels like a tough matchup, especially for a newcomer. Obviously, he won the most recent, or maybe the second most recent season of The Ultimate Fighter, where it was all about pitting newcomers versus UFC veterans, and we saw the veterans win pretty much every time. Matsumoto isn't quite as green as some of those guys in that competition, although he is still only 24 years old. Guy's 14-0, super skilled, but that experience you really just can't make up for that Katona has. I think Katona is going to have the better wrestling, and I think he's going to be able to put the pace on and avoid some of the big strikes of Matsumoto. I'm taking Katona to win this one by decision. Next up is a flyweight matchup between Matheus Nicolau and Almabayev. Nicolau now has been KO'd in back-to-back fights. Brandon Royval with that crazy KO over him, and then most recently Alex Perez got the KO on him. He's a good counterpuncher, but we've seen these good strikers really find his chin. Almabayev is a tough matchup. Super strong wrestling. He hasn't really been tested. Nicolau is going to be the best fighter he's faced by a significant margin, I'd say. But I've seen a lot of really good things out of him. His wrestling is legit. He closes the distance so fast, and his takedown attempts are lightning quick. Even if you stuff the takedown, he stuffs you up against the cage, and then he sort of just works you there, and he really is a tough guy to keep off of you. I think Almabayev wins this one by decision. I just don't know if Nicolau has the takedown defense to really have an answer for the grappling of Almabayev. Next up is Darren Elkins and Daniel Pineda. Hard one to call here. Both these guys are kind of in like the twilights of their careers, I'd say. But, you know, for me, Elkins has looked better lately. He's coming off of a finish win. Pineda hasn't won in a little bit. I'm taking Elkins to win this one by submission, but yeah, it's a tough one to call. Next up is a bantamweight matchup between Jake Hadley and Cameron Smotherman. Hadley looked pretty good in his 135 debut. I honestly had my suspicions. I thought he was going to look small because I didn't even think he was that big as a flyweight. But it did not look like size was a big problem for him. He took on Kalen Loughran, who's another shorter guy, but I thought Loughran was going to be a lot thicker. You didn't really see that. Smotherman is a late replacement in this matchup. He signed on to fight in the last week or so. He lost his Contender Series matchup in like less than a minute. We didn't really get to see a whole lot out of him, but he wants to strike. He wants to get his counter punching in. I think Hadley wins this one by decision. He's had more success in his career. Obviously, he struggled a bit at flyweight, but it's looking like bantamweight's a better fit for him. More energy, and I'm excited to see how he looks at 135 here. We're taking Hadley to win this one by decision. Next up is a flyweight matchup between Charles Johnson and Sumudaerji. Charles Johnson is looking to enter the top 15 after this matchup. Feels like he already should be in there. He's won 3 in a row with most recently a KO over Josh Van. But he was on a bit of a skid before that, so I guess I get it. He's looked so good in his last 3 fights, though, especially versus Josh Van. I said going into that fight, you know, watch out for Charles Johnson striking. He's tall, and he's got a lot of power. And I think the issue with him is sort of the gas tank. We've seen him fade later in fights, but it feels like he's really found his pace that he needs to fight at to have the juice to go for 3 rounds, to where recently he's been the fresher guy later on in fights. And if that's the case, he's a big problem because he's got a lot of power and he's got a really good striking arsenal. Sumudaerji's been finished twice in a row, submitted both times. I mean, I think Charles Johnson is going to be happy to go in there and strike the Sumudaerji, and I think he's just better. So we're taking Charles Johnson to win this one by KO. Next up is a bantamweight matchup between the number 10 ranked Rob Font and the number 12 ranked Kyler Phillips. This is Kyler's first fight as a ranked bantamweight. He is getting the Rob Font treatment after a pretty dominant win over Pedro Munoz. We knew this guy was an interesting prospect, but he really impressed me in that Munoz win. Munoz is a tough guy to a lot of people go in there and end up beating him, but we haven't seen people make him look as bad as Kyler Phillips has made him look. Like, you know, Chito Vera didn't do that. Some other guys didn't do that versus Munoz. So that was really impressive. The guy's got a really good striking. He wobbled Munoz a couple of times in there, and he's super aggressive. Font, obviously, is a very good striker. And we know he has power. He had that knockout win not too long ago. But his issue for me is it feels like his chin is sort of giving out on him. Almost every fight, you see him kind of just get stunned and kind of crumble a little bit. He's a guy who's taking a lot of damage, and I think he's in every... it's telling when Corey Sandhagen was so insistent to wrestle with him. Obviously, he suffered that injury, but he knew that you don't want to mess around with Font too much on the feet. So he's obviously going to be dangerous. All that being said, I think Kyler's the younger guy. I think he can take a shot much better. I think he's going to have more power. I think he finds a KO over Rob Font, a guy who no one's really been able to finish that consistently, but that chin's got to give out sooner or later, I'm thinking. And I think this might be the fight it happens. And our main event is Anthony Fluffy Hernandez taking on Michel Pereira. Sick middleweight fight here. A lot on the line, I'd say, in the rankings. Pereira's move to 185 has absolutely been a revelation. He's on a 3-fight finish streak since he's done that. He wasn't losing at welterweight, really. I mean, I think he was 5-0 before he made his move to 185, but he missed weight, and he wasn't really finishing guys, and now he's getting finishes when he moves up to 185. What do you know? I think his speed is really carrying him in the division. He's a lot quicker than some of these 185ers he's fighting, and I think he's kind of dialed back some of the craziness. It's hard to really say that because all of his fights have pretty much ended in the first round, but I don't think you're seeing some of the just obnoxious backflips, stuff that you just shouldn't be doing if you're actually trying to win a fight, because he knows that these guys are a lot more dangerous than some of the guys he was fighting at 170. I think he was really only doing some of that crazy stuff versus guys he knew how to win. So it just feels like he's got a good amount of crazy versus a bad amount of crazy as before. And we know his power carries. I mean, he just KO'd, whatever that guy's name is, Potieria. Or no, yeah, he got a submission over them. But we know the power is going to carry in this division. Fluffy is another super tough guy. I mean, this is going to be one that's tough to watch either guy lose. I've been saying Fluffy is a dark horse in the division for a bit now. He's just got a really tough combination of grappling, cardio, and pace that he puts on guys where, in most 5-round fights, I mean, I'm going to take him against most of these guys in the division. Even the really dangerous ones like Roman Kopylov, who he most recently defeated, who are really dangerous strikers. We saw, he took some hard shots in that second round, but he just absolutely drowned Kopylov with his grappling when it mattered most. And, even if Kopylov got out of that second round, I think it just was going to be a disaster for him. He was just going to get the pace put on him. Fluffy's given up a lot of experience. Pereira's got something like almost 40 or over 40 career fights, where Hernandez is closer to 14. And we know Pereira's been in the UFC for longer. For me, I'm looking at the striking matchup here, and I think Pereira's going to have the faster hands. We saw Hernandez get cracked a bit by Roman Kopylov, take some hard shots that I think coming from Michel Pereira are going to be a bit quicker, more accurate. He'll be able to follow up when he lands a bit better than Kopylov. And there's nothing that tells me that, Fluffy's really going to be able to take Pereira down and just smother him. Pereira's got good grappling. And if Hernandez, I think, gets reckless with the takedowns, I think he could get caught in the gilly. Pereira's super opportunistic with the submissions. The pick here is Pereira by round 2 KO. I think he's just got the faster hands, a lot of power to go with it. Obviously, anything can happen, and I think a win or loss for either of these guys is significant, but, you'll definitely see either of these guys come back, even if they lose. They're two really tough guys, but I think Pereira wins tomorrow. So with that is the breakdown. Like and subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. We got some bangers coming in the next few weeks. Obviously, UFC 308, I believe it is, or 309. Ilya versus Holloway. A lot to look forward to. Power Slap main event next Friday. If you're into that, which you should be, it's absolutely sick to watch. So, thank you. We'll see you on the next one.